The story begins with a boy named Konohana Jin, recalling his older sister who was the type of person who blames others in the name of justice. She scolded him for not eating the food their aunt had given, but when he asked her to eat it, she remained silent. It was strange because the food wasn't even that good, yet she expected him to eat it while she didn't. She always guilt-tripped people and made them do her work, using her so-called justice as a tool for blame. This was why he wanted to live apart from her. While they were on their way somewhere, she kept asking him if they weren't at their destination yet. He didn't answer her because he was sick of how many times she had asked. Ever since he got his license, she had been ordering him to fetch her or to bring her somewhere constantly. When they arrived, he was checking the drinks and bento. His sister asked him which one had the sake, but it was the heaviest one, so he told her to try lifting it. They only got the sake bag and started walking while there was a ton of luggage in the car. Jin calmed down and started carrying them. He had already made it this far, so after waiting just a little bit more, he would be going to a university outside of the prefecture, and he would finally be free from his sister. As he was thinking about that, a huge explosion happened, and he suddenly found himself in the middle of a forest. The parking lot was gone with his car, and there was complete silence. He wondered if they were supposed to be camping out or if he was dreaming. He took out his phone, but there was no signal. He tried to calm down and decided to walk to see the city. As he walked, the only thing he encountered was a river. He decided to go a little bit more and saw the sea. Even though he walked a lot, he didn't meet any mountain climbers, let alone a city. He was confused as to what was going on, but then got distracted by his growling stomach. Thankfully, he had water, tea, coke, snacks, and bentos for 4 people. He started eating while he was observing what was around him. He hadn't seen any trash around for a while now and wondered if there was a beach without plastic garbage. Also, he knew he had to prepare for spending the night soon. In the first place, this place was so wide, so he didn't think he would be able to make it back in time. He was glad he brought a cutter to set up their place to watch the fireworks. Through his older sister's tyranny, he was forced to go to a fireworks display, even though he was invited by his friend to go camping by a mountain stream. He regrets putting off watching the survival program for later. It was also something that he could use if he wanted to make his escape from his older sister into reality. He was trying to light a fire by rubbing the woods, but he couldn't muster enough strength. But he should hurry because he had to make a fire before the sun went down. After a while, he noticed smoke coming out. He put some bushes on it and managed to fire it. Luckily, he brought his jacket so he wouldn't get cold. He was exhausted. He tried to calm himself down by saying that when he woke up, he would be out of this dream. But when he woke up, he was still in the same place, so it was confirmed that he was not dreaming. He noticed that the fire was burning out, so he put more wood. After a while, he decided to go in the opposite direction with the hope of seeing the city. After which, he needed to gather dead tree branches again. He somehow got bitten by insects too. After walking for a while, he reached a cliff, which meant that the land was surrounded by the sea, making it an island. The reason he couldn't see any more land was because he was at the other end of the island. At this point, even if he got on a boat, he didn't know where he should be going. He collapsed on the ground after realizing the reality. He didn't even know if there was someone else on this island. After gathering his strength, he continued walking. He wondered why he was experiencing something like that. He just went along with his sister and went to see the fireworks display that he didn't even want to watch. After all, he still wouldn't be able to see the fireworks anyway. He had to pick up dead tree branches soon, even though he didn't know why he kept thinking that he needed to gather them. He ended up arriving at a waterfall. He saw the place where the water was gushing out from. It was close to the riverbed. He decided to gather up some branches and go home. The smoke produced by the fire might have been discovered by somebody else. He started cutting some wood to prepare a house because it seemed like he was going to be there for a while. While making the house, he wasn't sure about its strength. He wondered if he should increase the pillar or fortify the wall with soil and stones. When he got hungry, he ate his last bento, which meant he had to find food tomorrow. He suddenly heard a rustle and peeked at the back of the house. He guessed that it might be a rabbit or a wild boar, so he decided to hurry up and fortify the walls. The next day arrived and he wanted to take a bath. He went to the river and he caught a fish. Since it was peaceful and there were no other people, it was easier to catch it. He cooked the fish and started eating. It didn't even have any taste because there was no seasoning. He remembered that he also needed to do something before he ran out of drinks. He wondered if he should drink the spring water bit by bit until he got used to it. He decided to do his best to build more of the house tomorrow and went to sleep. The next day he made a lot of progress. He covered the ceiling with twigs and leaves. It was kind of dark inside, so he thought about making a window using some plastic bags. Today he dug a drain and piled up stones as preventive measures for rain. He then found a ragged rock. He knew what it was, but he needed to put it on an open fire to make it warm. It may come in handy because it gets cold at night. He wondered if he should make it so he could take a bath. He started warming up the rock and put it inside the water. It was really hot, so he had to be careful. While cleaning himself, he wanted to make something that looked like a pot because he was getting tired of grilled fish and crabs. The leaves were turning red on the mountain these days. He was glad he got to take a bath, but it was getting a little cold now, so he dressed up. He did some pottery and became able to cook a few stewed dishes. It was good to know because it lets him eat more kinds of food. After that, he finally finished his house. There was still room for improvement, but it was a success. Before he knew it, snow had piled up on top of the mountain. While walking in the forest, he noticed some mushrooms, but he didn't know if they were poisonous, so he had to go. He went to his house and made a fire. Before long, it will snow there too, and it will be difficult to catch fish. He wondered if he could make some dried fish and dried seaweed. He was able to somehow manage himself till now, but he didn't know how long he would be able to move. Just as he was thinking that it started to snow, he lost hope and was almost sure he was going to die like that all alone. Before he fell asleep, something flinched in front of him and started to apologize while spinning around his head. It said that it got him involved while it was summoning a hero, and this was not the world that he knew. That was something that Jin didn't expect. Jin had no idea what it was saying, but he told it to return him, but apparently it can't do that. To begin with, he could only go into this world just before he died. It suddenly started screaming, saying that it could still feel his lifespan from back there. Jin said that he didn't know what it was talking about and asked where the hell he was if this wasn't the world he knew. This was a world with magic and swords. Jin didn't believe that because on the mountain he hadn't even seen any monsters or dungeons. He asked if it was a spirit, and it said that it wasn't just a spirit he knew. It used to be a god. Since it summoned a hero, its spiritual power as a god decreased significantly. After summoning, its existence became unclear, but its power would come back eventually. It said all this about the hero, but the truth was that summoning any living thing was fine. The purpose of the summoning was to connect that world to this world for a moment. In the instant the two worlds connect, God's power is consumed, and for the world to escape destruction due to extreme materialization, this world needs living things from that world, which would also save this world from extreme spiritualization. Jin couldn't understand a thing from what it was saying, but didn't stop it. It said that finally the heroes that could be summoned here have limited qualifications. The number of people that should be called was 3. They were summoned just before they died. It added that it didn't realize that he got caught up with Haruka and the others. Hearing his older sister's name, Jin was shocked and asked if his sister was a hero, and it confirmed him. 3 people matched the number of people between his sister and her friends. He questioned if he was supposed to die as well, but earlier it said he still had a remaining lifespan on the other side. Suddenly, 7 people appeared in front of Jin, and one of them told the ball of light that it was too slow. His name was Van. He said that they were going to listen to his wish and then deal with this later. There was also a dog laying there. The light ball said that Rish failed and some power was left lingering around the passage. It already told him that the spread was wider than usual. It said that it wasn't its fault, but even Jin knew that it was its fault. Van repeated that they would deal with it later. An old lady asked Jin who he was going to choose. The other boy said that since it was impossible to return him to the other world, they were going to let him choose a guardian deity in this world. Usually the summoned person was gifted protection, and the remaining lifespan he would have had in that world would be bestowed to him as skills or as items that he would need in this world, such as physical ability, magic, fascination, gold, or anything that he desired. Van's power was the fire attribute where destruction and restoration were present. The other guy was Rudel with earth and stillness magic. The old man was Kadal, and he ruled over flora and order. The little boy was Ish. He oversaw water and healing. The old lady was Pal for the land and harvest. The little girl was Mishto for light and wind, as well as romance and caprice. The beautiful lady was Halalfa, and she oversaw light, love, and beauty. And lastly, that dog was Rish, whose power was now mostly gone, but he was for ice and darkness, though he didn't have any more power to bestow on him. The light ball explained that his powers were on the verge of vanishing, and he was even brimming with confidence before. Jin asked if the powers could overlap. They said that in this world, after birth, people vanish. They were the only ones who were in there, but other people were powerful. It was rare to be a god until your power was already reasonable enough to be treated as such. They asked who he preferred, and he wanted to choose all of them. Kadal explained to him that his lifespan in that world was insufficient to receive all their powers. Putting it another way, it negates and weakens the divine protection that was given. There was an exception if they compromised or were always close to each other, but they only occasionally see each other, so he wouldn't get any advantage from it. The power received would manifest its nature based on the disposition of the god. If Van bestows strength on an individual, it will show immediately. However, if he gives magical powers to him, the latter power bestowed would get a different effect. Mishto continued to explain that it was the same as if she was fascinated with him, but then started to feel affection. If she got bestowed by Pal, she would experience friendship. But if it was Halalfa, it might be love or obsession. Jin was as confused as ever. Kadal told him to think about what he wanted to do, and they would bestow him the necessary power for it. He said that he wanted to live comfortably, without any desire or restrictions, and without getting involved with his older sister. And he also wanted to have a power where he could freely look around this world. The light ball said that his sister Haruka was doing good, and her sense of justice was strong. It was the reason why it chose her. But all Jin could think about was how she used justice as a tool. He then realized that Haruka also received abilities, and he asked what it gave her. When it responded that it gave him domination and all magic, Jin was 100% sure that he didn't want to get involved with her. Considering his requests, Kadal explained that the powers that would be bestowed on him were magical ability, martial arts, production, healing, cooking, storage, transition, exploration, appraisal, mental fortitude, language, freedom separation, and hero killing. Jin said he didn't want to get involved, but he was confused about the hero killing skill. But he still confirmed that he was okay with those abilities. Kadal gave him a sword because it was necessary if he wanted to live in this world. That was all a kill blade that could cut almost anything. They also gave him something that was going to be useful at the destination they would transfer him to. It was a power that aided vegetation growth. Kadal said that they were so grateful that he didn't have any complaints even though he was suddenly taken here. Jin noticed the puppy and wanted to take him with him. Van said that Rich's power and sight were almost gone. That's why he couldn't bestow any power. So in that case, the only thing he could bestow on him was himself. Jin didn't mind that and wanted to take him anyway. And finally, the last thing they would give him was where he would be transferred to a safe and comfortable house. The abilities he had were compatible and should be a good addition to his disposition. When Jin opened his eyes, he was in front of a big house. He was amazed by everything. There was amazing scenery, and the temperature was also warm even though it was winter earlier, and the house they gave them looked more like a mansion than a house. When he was about to enter the house, he saw his reflection, and it was different than the other world. He knew he should get used to this world's appearances and attire, but they should have told him if they were going to change him too. When he entered the house, he started looking around and everything was spacious. He looked in the kitchen and he had a big food storage that would never go out of stock even if he used it often. There was husked rice, Chinese cabbage, potatoes, tea leaves, miso, soy sauce, and all kinds of beef, pork, mutton, chicken. It was like he was in a dream. He even had fish swimming. He wondered if that water was connected to Japan because he always ate the same thing on that island. He couldn't help but feel hungry when he saw those ingredients. Firstly, he wanted to take a bath and then eat. The bath was so relaxing because it had been a while since he had a proper bath. That reminded him of something. He wondered how he could polish rice. He decided to see if he could use the skill he received. When he got dressed, he used his appraisal skills first. He learned that he needed to open the water gate so the water turbine underground would be able to move. It was amazing that he could understand how to use it. When he prepared the dinner, he put a bowl of it in Rich's place. Rich bestowed himself to him. It was the only power and protection he could give. From now on, he decided to improve the power he received. He patted him and told him that when he was better, he would give him meat to eat. He continued preparing his dinner. He was making sirloin steak and dried cabbage, which was a weird combination, but he wanted to eat. But he could smell a violent odor of fish and crabs in here. The dinner was ready, and after he prayed, he started to eat. The food was delicious. It was already amazing with salt and pepper, flooded with gravy, and eaten with freshly cooked rice. The cabbage was also soft yet crunchy. He was glad that he survived. When he lay down on his bed, he thought about how he didn't have to worry about the fire going out anymore, nor did he need to be frightened of beasts coming. He was going to live in this unknown world. But as he was so comfortable, he had a hard time falling asleep. In the next scene, it had been for weeks since he was living by himself in his home, and he did nothing but eat, and time passed with just him idling around. He also slept a lot. Thanks to the healing, his body feels healthy, but he couldn't even get up and about. It was likely an effect caused by the rigorous life he had on the island. However, his abilities from the gods were full of amazing things. Through appraisal, he could make basic dishes based on only the main ingredients. The skills were designed to be convenient in that he could make any recipe he knew with any ingredients. But his knowledge of food was limited, so he wanted to do various cuisines that could be found in this world. As he was trying to decide what to eat today, decided on making ramen, but even though there were dried bonito flakes, it was raw and he wanted to dry it. Though in the first place there was no wheat to mill. He ended up cooking fish, rice, and a good soup. Since he used wheat a lot, he wanted to grate it quickly into flour, but he couldn't even store it since there were no containers or sacks. He received money and a map from the gods, so he wondered if he should go shopping. He looked at the map and tried to decide where to go. He remembered the recommended place and used his transition ability to take a look at the place. Not even a minute later, he was in front of the frontier city, Kanum. Kanum was close to the forest where monsters dwell, and naturally, adventurers tend to gather in places where monsters constantly appear. Seemed like this was a perfect place to earn gold and become stronger by defeating monsters. His status right now was an independent knight, but registering to the Adventurers Guild should make his visits to this city easier. When he entered the city, he felt like he was standing out. He wondered if it was because of the brand new clothes or the appearance he got from the gods. He decided to buy a hoodie first. He felt more comfortable after wearing the hoodie. The money in this world that he got from the gods should be almost the same amount as how much his big sister got. As he was walking, he noticed a potion bottle which amazed him. He could probably make one by using appraisal to know the materials needed for it. He then saw a food stand and wanted to try this world's food, but the bacteria shown by appraisal seemed dangerous, so he stopped. When he saw a fine grape trellis, he remembered that he needed some farming tools too. He wanted to buy a harrow, and then asked the lady if he could get a grape trellis outside. The lady didn't mind him taking some with him. He then asked if they had any weapons. The lady said she knew a good store if he was looking for weaponry. She asked if he was a new adventurer and recommended picking the leather armor. Jin thanked the lady and left to see the weapons store. He was amazed at what he was seeing and felt like he was in a game. He touched a sword and wondered if it could be swung easily. Appraisal helped him see various items, but he didn't know which was good, so he chose a random one. He wondered if that weapon belt for the sword and knife were enough. Afterward, he bought armor, which was a little expensive to have a fair amount of protection, and some leather items. He went to an inn because it was pretty late at night. After all, transition cannot be used in the city. He didn't have any worries as he was in the inn anyway. He decided to go back home to drop off the things he bought and then be back again tomorrow to visit the guild. The next day arrived and he went to the guild to register. The receptionist girl asked if he was going to pay the registration fee or do a commission once without a reward, and he decided to pay the fee. She told him to wait for a moment while his adventurer's tag was being made. While he was waiting, he looked at some records in the demon forest. The monsters in that forest were possessed by the animal's evil spirits, and this gives information on the easiest places to go out from the forest's topography. A man came and asked him if he was the one who requested an escort to study adventurer's basics. He confirmed him and stated that he also wanted to ask for some advice regarding his abilities because he didn't know how strong he was. He was unsure about one person being his escort. The man introduced himself and his name was Dean. His rank was 2-starred silver and he needed to guide 5 of his juniors. While Jin was amazed by his rank, he introduced himself, but as he was too focused on him, he accidentally said his name was Jean. A girl came and told Dean to not choose randomly. Dean told her to shut up and reminded her that he was done being another noble's companion. Jin wondered if they gave favorable treatment to nobles' requests there. He felt obligated to state that he wouldn't like to be involved in something troublesome. But Dean said it was his fault and decided to settle it right away. He told the girl that tomorrow Chris would be back, and that guy would gladly take on that request. But the girl said that if the request were concentrated on Chris, then the nobles would only have him secured as their point of contact. She then glanced at Jin. Dean told her that he would never be their contact and they shouldn't rely too much on one adventurer. They should engage with the guild. She seemed like she wanted that to happen too, but they only had 2 people with silver rank there. She asked if he could at least cooperate a little. Jin was confused because she kept looking at him as if she wanted him to intervene and he just wanted to go home now. A woman came and told her to stop because she had been relying too much on his brother. The woman's name was Kana. Dean thanked Kana, but she said that it was his fault for spoiling her. He may refuse to educate his juniors, but he would have to choose from the list of candidates that the guild had brought up. Kana then apologized to Jin for showing him something improper. He was thinking that he was extremely familiar with what was happening. Dean and the girl, Emil, were siblings. When heard about them being siblings, he felt a natural response of rejection because it reminded him of his older sister. Jin stated that he was withdrawing his request now. Emil seemed pretty happy with that and she thanked him. She told him to call out a party that looked promising, but he corrected her that this wasn't what he meant. He said that he didn't need any escorts and he would like to withdraw his request for that. Kana apologized for the inconvenience they had caused and informed him that the charge for his request would be duly returned. He said that it was okay and instead he wanted to take the adventurer's manual with him. He went out after getting the manual and took a deep breath. Every sister for him was a landmine even if they were older or younger. He would not endure being in that kind of connection again in this world. Suddenly Mishto appeared and asked if he was not going to use separation. Jin was shocked to see her, but she pushed him because he was the only one who could see her right now. Talking to her through his consciousness was fine, and she said that he should do the same when another spirit or guardian comes. He asked if she could hear what he was thinking and she confirmed with him. She added that he was only consciously talking to her. She joked that thinking about something naughty was fine too. Jin was unbothered by her teasing and stated that using separation seemed like it would take effect without stopping. He didn't hesitate to use it to sever his connections with his older sister though. She informed him that he could use it whenever he wished, and they also got stronger that way. However, expanding the target of separation too much would weaken its effectiveness. Jin was puzzled, so she explained that if he used separation in one target, the people around that person would stop talking about Jin, and since he was trying to affect many people, the effectiveness would be lessened. She just told him to not forget that information she gave him and to use it however he liked. Jin thanked her, and after smiling cutely, she disappeared. He wondered if she took interest in him because he didn't use it even though he had that ability, or if it was because of giving advice. He decided to focus on his plans and go out to see the demon forest. According to the manual, a rabbit monster would appear right before the entrance of the forest. The record in the library stated the importance of the horns on monsters. The weak monsters were often called hornless, due to their horns being tiny. With what he had equipped now, he believed that he could likely go against some without dying. He didn't have any escorts anyway, so he decided to try using his sword. He could put in anything except creatures in his storage skill, so he hid the all-kill blade in it too. He saw a rabbit, but it wasn't a monster, it was just an ordinary one. But behind him, a monster rabbit was coming at him. He dodged its move, and realized that it was a hornless rabbit. Fortunately, he managed to cut the rabbit with one swing. He wondered what would happen if he used the sword he brought from the shop, and when he tried it, he still defeated it in a single swing. He used his appraisal ability to look around. The grass was beautiful, and he also saw raspberries and gooseberry gummies. Unlike the mountain on that island, this forest seemed fun and was abundant. He saw a mushroom, and it was the same as the one he saw on the island. When he used his appraisal skills, he realized that he could eat it. Suddenly, he flinched and felt a monster's presence. It wasn't a rabbit for sure. When he looked behind, he encountered a large horned bear. In the next scene, Jin looked down upon the dead bear, surprised by how easy it was to defeat. Mishito suddenly appeared and asked if he wasn't going to use magic. He stopped with a jolt. He asked her not to suddenly appear like that. He realized that he had forgotten about magic, and he thought at this level there was no need to use it. However, he wanted to try it out, and he started to look for a monster. Mishita said there was no need to walk around to look for one and told him to try using search magic. Jin said he was given so many abilities that he hadn't paid much attention to. He tried the exploration magic and found one. He thought if he used it right at the start, it would have been easier. Mishita wanted to help Jin more, so she told him to imagine what kind of magic he wanted to use, and drew out the attributes he needed. He asked what she meant by saying attributes. She said all of those attributes, such as Van's fire, Rudel's earth, and stillness, were attributes that Jin possesses. When the rabbit monster started to dash to him, Jin first tried to imagine and then attacked him with a wind slash. Jin saw it on the ground dead, and realized thanks to Mishita the magic appeared. Mishita told him once he got to know them, the other spirits would lend him their power. People who could use magic were rare, so she told him to use it with care. Then she disappeared. Jin decided to go sell the monsters off to the guild. Once those were stowed, they would be transported closer to the gate. He started to think of a way to carry the bear to the guild. He had put its head in a sack and was carrying it on his back. He saw a man and asked if he could assess it for trade. He was shocked and asked if he had come there in that state. Jin said yes, and then the man told him it didn't suit his face, and it was amazing yet rough looking. Jin said he just thought it would have been better than walking around with the sharply cut section exposed. There were a lot of dismembered monsters hanging around. The man told him to put it down. Jin wondered if it was because of mental fortitude that he was able to drain the blood from a rabbit and cut a bear in half. When he was on the island, he was at his limit handling fish. It would have been an unbearable sight in his previous world, but now he had mental fortitude. When the man looked at the bear, he said it was great that all of its pelts could be used. He told Jin he was not only strong but also had skills. He said it would fetch a higher price in the Adventurers Guild, so asked him if he was okay to sell it in a trade guild. He said he was told the same at the counter, but it was fine. Jin thought about Dean and Emil, and realized those siblings were in the Adventurers Guild, so he didn't want to go anywhere near them. The man asked him to give him a quarter of an hour. He said he got it and asked if there was anywhere to learn how to make potions. The man said for the potions, the headquarters next door had recipes. First he said the Doctors Guild, but then he realized magic potions were more likely to be with the alchemists. He said some things were only handled by individual guilds or persons, but most of the knowledge they wanted to spread was generally entrusted to trade guilds. Jin seemed surprised that there was such a convenient system. Jin told the man he was going next door for a while and asked him to do the appraisal with the intent of selling everything. When Jin got the potion recipes, he started to look over it. There were all kinds of recipes from imperial court dishes to baking a brick. The potion itself seemed easy enough to make. He thought because of divine powers, he seemed to have physical abilities better than the average person. He thought he could heal his injuries with recovery magic and healing, but he wanted to make it look like he was using potions to heal himself. On the way back, he decided to get some tools. The man Jin left the bear with appeared and told him there was a magic stone and asked if he wanted to check it out. He thought a magic stone was in the guidebook. A magic stone was seldom obtained from corpses of monsters. The reminder of the spirit that remained in the heart turned into a gem, and it was expensive. It was really small. Jin said he thought it would have been the size of a ping pong ball. The man said it was a red spinel. The redder spinel, the more expensive it was. The man asked if it was also for trade and said with its size and color, it could be used by someone strong in fire magic. Jin said he didn't mind trading for it. Even if he didn't have it, he could use magic anyway. When Jin left there, he decided to walk around and eat before night fell. When he saw the food, he seemed pleased. There was a lot of bread offered there, sauerkraut and sausage or ham and cheese sandwiches. He stared at the counter and it seemed like a well-grilled one should have been fine. He bought one sausage and enjoyed it. Then he saw, brought, and ate some dried fruits which he found sour. He thought he could boil it with sugar and use it to make candy, or maybe he could also use it in meat dishes. Then he saw a brown sugar seller. He thought they broke it off in clumps and then sold it. The weighing scales were nice and retro and it smelt like sake, which was a Japanese beer. He wondered if drinking alcohol would be alright or not, and wondered what the legal drinking age was there. As Jin was walking around, he saw a large group of people and wondered what they were doing. He saw a whole roast pig which was sandwiched in bread. It looked tasty, so he ate that too. The pork was fragrant on the outside and juicy on the inside, though the bread was disappointing. A whole roast was sectioned per part in the pantry. He thought he would get a pig later. Finally, he arrived at home. Jin saw Rish in his bed and told him he was home. He wanted to eat a lot more food, but maybe it was because of his stay on that island that made his stomach smaller. Today, he was able to hunt monsters and make money. He used up a bear's worth of potion tools and tried to heal Rish. He thought Rish was not sick or injured. His existence itself was getting fainter. He heard that healing did not work, but he was still using it on him. He hoped he would get better soon. Then he put his dog to sleep. Before eating the meal, Jin prayed and then thought about the cloth in Kanem, which had such poor quality that he had ended up not buying any, and since he had been given language, he wanted to read books from this world. He decided to go to the royal capital today. When he arrived at the capital, he found it huge. It was his first time in the capital, so Jin asked a man if there was a guide map he could use or a person who could guide him. He handed him a simple guide map and told him if he wanted to shop, the trade guild could show him around. He said they might have taken him for a ride and had him buy all sorts of stuff. Then said if he went straight ahead, he would see kids hanging out in the square. He told him to pay any of them a fee and they would guide him around, but it could have been hit or miss. He understood, gave him his payment, and told him to keep the exchange. When he was about to leave, the man said the well in the square, there should have been a kid named Leon with ash blue hair. If he was there, he told Jin to ask him. Jin came to the royal capital of the neighboring country in case something went wrong, but it was surprisingly small. The buildings were all connected, so he arrived at the square. Beside the well in the square, there should have been a kid named Leon with ash blue hair. He saw a kid and wondered if he was him. He asked if his name was Leon. The kid glared and approved that he was Leon. Jin thought his face was scary but still asked if he could guide him around. Jin was explaining himself to Leon. Jin said the reason he inquired was because he heard from the guard that he did guided tours around the city. Jin was afraid and got suspicious that something was off. He thought of the possibility of being tricked by the guard. Jin told Leon he might have mistaken him. He said no, and it was also a sort of destiny. Leon said he was free so he would guide him around. Unlike how he looked, Jin thought he was quite friendly. Jin asked Leon if there was a must-see place. Leon said speaking of a must-see place there, that was the view from the top of the stronghold where civilians could not enter it. Jin thought about how to retort with what he said. He was a civilian, but he had seen it and he suggested a place he could not enter. Instead of those sentences, he just asked if he had any recommendations for clothing or a dining hall. Leon wanted to eat quickly, and he said he had an acquaintance who ran a clothing shop that was famous in its way in the capital. Jin wondered why he was making such a scary face. On their way, Jin asked Lean why the walls of the houses were stuck close to each other. He said besides the fact that the land within the city walls was limited, the width of houses along a road was taxed. Sharing a wall to split the tax half and half was the norm. Jin asked what else was taxed. He said the city tax, transit tax, and also glass tax. He couldn't hide his shock that glass was taxed. Leon said glass windows were luxury items. In the private houses there, Jin would hardly ever see them. Come to think of it, Jin realized he didn't see a lot of glass windows even in Kanem. Jin saw a large building in the square and asked what it was. Leon said he was talking about the Bough of Spirits. Leon said akin to how spirits liked it, plants were grown in the inner courtyard. It was a beautiful place with clean water running at all times. Jin realized they had faith in the spirits there. Leon suddenly stopped and apologized, telling him that he should have been showing him places like that. Jin said it was okay and that he would pass by on his way home, but thought he was just not suited for guided tours. An old man appeared, and Jin wondered if he was a butler. He had a lot of questions, but he called Leon young miss. Leon turned to Jin and said his name Note, who was from his childhood. Note was the Alderhide family's butler. That wasn't what Jin was most concerned about. Then Leon asked Note why he was there. He said someone was after him and told him to get out of the city quickly. He said all arrangements had been made. Jin saw another person named Lilith. The note told Leon to, for now, get in the wagon. However, Leon said there was no reason for him to run away. The note told young Miss that was a strategic retreat. When Leon resisted to stay, Note punched him on the stomach and said they didn't have time to dawdle. Then he told Miss Lilith that young Miss was hurt. Lilith got angry and asked him why he didn't use a potion. Note said the young Miss had left the Aldehyde family, she could spend none of the family fortunes. Jin watched everything in shock and wondered what was happening. Lilith told him they needed to move before there was an uproar. Jin told Lilith he didn't understand, but if they were wounded, he gave the potion and said if she was fine with it, use it. He said it was a potion he made, and though it was a trial product, he checked it with appraisal, so it should have been fine. Lilith asked who he was. Meanwhile, Note told her they were on their way to Tem's shop. Lilith took Jin's hand and said she would take him there. Note grabbed Leon, who he called young Miss, and made him drink the potion Jin gave. Jin asked if it worked and said he was a little uneasy about using it on another person without first trying it himself. Lilith thanked Jin, and Note told him that he had their gratitude. Jin started to think he didn't care about the clothing shop anymore. He just wished they would have let him get off. Leon woke up and asked where he was. Note told him that they were inside a wagon. Leon told Lilith he was pretty sure that he was banished from the family, but he didn't remember doing anything that would have made him a fugitive. Lilith said he had always been honorable, but his younger brother was uneasy because he was still alive. She said he didn't only unjustly banish him, he made up another charge against him. Jin was trying to understand what was going on. He wanted to avoid troublesome things. Rather, he wondered why someone who was injured was in a family feud, and they told him she was a young Miss. When they got out of the carriage, they saw a man named Thame. He welcomed Leon as the master of Aldehyde. Leon said it had been a long time, apologized, and said he didn't have a lot of time. Leon wanted him to assist Jin with clothes. Then Leon turned to Jin and apologized for the unfinished tour. Jin thought this wasn't a time to apologize. Jin asked Leon if it was better to leave soon, and Leon told Thame that he would leave it to him. Lilith apologized to Jin for the late introduction and said her name was Lilith from House Deviland. She gave her a ring and said if he encountered any problem, come and look for her. However, she was sure it was going to be bothersome around her too, so he probably would want to stay away for a while. Jin said he would take it for now, then asked who the young Miss was. She said Leora, then realized he was calling her Leon, was a girl. He was shocked that she was a girl, and her real name was Leora Aldehyde. Lilith told Jin that Leora was flat-chested, looked tough, and was stronger than most men by a long shot, which was why a lot of folks thought she was a man and called her Leon. She said, "Then pardon me," and left. Thame apologized to Jin for involving him in this affair and said they would prepare remuneration for the clothing, so they only asked him to keep it quiet. Jin said he didn't have anyone to tell anyway. That aside, that clothing shop didn't have any clothes, but he was a bespoke tailor shop. Meanwhile, a few girls appeared and wanted him to let them take his measurements. They asked about the clothes and buttons. Jin felt tired and found a place. He thought it should have been okay there to do exploration magic. It was quite handy SNCs he could look for not-so-popular places. He said he was able to buy sheets and bed covers from the fabric shop beside the clothing store. He decided to go to the next store, which was a bookstore, but he thought he would eat first. He ate his meal and went back to his home. Reach was lying down, and Jin caressed his head. Then he decided to read the books he bought. He wondered if he could make a lamp, and he didn't have alcohol for fuel, but he had rapeseed oil. He thought if it was reflected on cleanly polished metal, he could make a glass. Then he recalled what Mishto said. He was going to imagine what kind of magic he wanted to use, then he was going to draw out the attributes he needed. Jin raised his index finger and said light, which appeared right on his finger. He thought it was convenient. Today was a sudden flurry of activity, but he got a lot out of it. Jin thought that scary-faced young man wasn't a man. It seemed like she had her priorities a little skewed, but she was a good, upstanding person. He didn't know what happened to her after that, but he prayed for her safety. Jin was calling Rish and telling him that they were heading back now. It had been a few months since Rish woke up. At first, he found it hard to even walk, but now he had recovered considerably, and even his fur looked better. In these few months, Jin inquired from a farmer and learned about raising livestock and making cheese. He moved to and from the country inside the forest and helped out with carpentry. He was concerned about the smell of the medicinal herbs, so he planned to build more dispensary sheds. Before winter came, he wanted to make it comfortable enough to stay indoors. He thought he should have gotten on with gathering raw materials for the building expansion. He didn't buy a cork oak seedling and wondered if he should have planted it. Then he decided to use the growth powder on it. It suddenly became way bigger. He thought he had used it on the grape trellis too, which had gotten amazing. He wondered if it would be a great raw material. Jin thought he should have gone shopping in Canaan. He wanted to deliver the game he had left in storage. Getting a room every time he delivered goods was troublesome for him. He had been of two minds about it, but he wondered if he should have rented a house in Kanam. Lately, Pinkhead, the younger sister of those siblings named Amil, was following Jin. He seemed to have stood out since he had unloaded a bear and potions wholesale on the trade guild. Being thought of as strange when he was seen purchasing home goods was another. Since it was established that he was staying in an inn, he was sure enough to rent a house. He saw a real estate agent and they moved around several properties together. When they came to one of the properties, the man told him because it was a new building, it was cheap and it was also on the good side of public safety. Jin thought in this world it seemed that the old houses were better. It was said that the previous homeowners would have made improvements so that it would be more comfortable to live in. He looked at the walls and saw there were even gaps in the walls which would have been unthinkable in Japan. He thought he had a house and also had transition magic, so before touching it up he should have helped out there and there to obtain knowledge. Jin told the man he decided on this house and requested him to take care of it. After renting the house, he assessed in carpentry and cheesemaking and assisted in plasterwork. When he was on his way, he ignored that Emil was still following him. Suddenly, Emil stopped Jin and asked if he was possibly going to the demon forest. She said the forest was dangerous when it was colder. He said he had already taken it into account. Emil asked him not to push himself as his life was more important than money. Jin said he was not pushing himself, so asked her not to worry about him. When she was after him, she tripped and fell on the floor with a sad expression. He wondered why she wasn't discouraged. Then he continued to go on his way. On the way, Jin saw Emil's older brother Dean. Dean stopped Jin and said he knew that coming from him was a bit much, but wondered if could have also shown up in the Adventurers Guild. The higher-ups were scolding Miss Kana, he said. Jin asked why was Miss Kana. Jin said because they said an excellent adventurer was taken by the trade guild. Jin said that the cause was Dean and that sister of his. Dean said he knew it was his fault and he was sorry. Jin thought the cause was certainly Pink Bro, but the creepy words and deeds after that were on Pinkhead. Jin said it was fine with him to drop by the Adventurers Guild, but he had one condition. He didn't want to let his sister come near him. He said when she saw him in the town, he didn't want her to follow her, go around him, get in his sight, or talk to him. He got that, but asked if her sister was cute. Jin thought his sister's filter was amazing and said she felt creepy to him and she wasn't his type. Dean asked if Emil wasn't his type, then what kind of person was his type? Jin said if he were to choose, he would have said someone who was the opposite of his sister. One with a no makeup look and didn't scream girly while he was kinda imagining Leora. Dean looked at him suspiciously, and Jin said he wasn't describing someone who looked male, so he took back what he said. As Jin thought, he wanted someone who looked a bit feminine. As an apology, Dean wanted to show Jin a place where a rare plant grew. He asked if he wanted to go there. Jin was interested, and he had plans to gather medicinal herbs today, so it should have been okay to go with him. He thought if only he weren't such a sister lover, he would have been normal. When they arrived, Jin found a herb named kinka, which was a ridiculous plant that was used to add fragrance to the alcohol that rich people drink. Jin thought it was a bit grassy smelling or earthly smelling and wondered if it would taste good. Dean said he didn't know, but he could get away with it with rich folks. Dean suggested Jin catch an adequate rabbit and make lunch out of it. Since Jin could not use transition or storage magic, he had to accept it. After Dean caught and cooked the rabbit on fire, Jin told him there were no feudal moves when he fought. Jin found it educational. Dean found it embarrassing because he was strong enough to hunt bears in succession. Jin said he only relied on brute strength. Again, Dean looked at him suspiciously. Jin knew he had no muscles or height. When they were eating, Dean suddenly flinched as he heard a rustle. Then Leora appeared. She apologized and asked if she surprised him. Jin asked why she was in a place like this. Leora said she was there to hunt a bear and draw water. It wasn't what Jin wanted to ask, but he could not say anything about her fugitive status with Dean there. He wondered if it would be bad to call her by name. Dean asked if they knew each other. Jin said yes. She said her name was Ash and was pleased to meet him. He said his name was Dean and that was how they met. Jin thought he was right not to call her by name. Leora turned to Jin and told him she would surely pay him back for the potion. He said she didn't have to, and he also made him show him around when she was wounded. Dean grinned at her, and for now, he wanted her to eat the meat. She said no, but eventually ate it. They all sat down around the fire. Dean told Leora if she was able to hunt bears, then she should have had enough to pay for the potion by now. She said the inn fees were a little steep. A gold coin a day was quite a lot. Dean asked her what kind of inn she was staying in. She said one with just a bed and table. Dean said she was being ripped off and asked why she didn't realize that. Leora said it was introduced to her by a pink-haired receptionist at the guild. Jin wondered if it wasn't Emil. Then Dean said Emil was working hard and she didn't have any bad intentions. He told them it was the inn's fault. Jin said it was extremely difficult to listen. Jin said only his relationship with his sister was creepy. He asked why the logic didn't get through to him when it came to her sister. Dean said after all she was doing her best, so it wouldn't have done for the people around her not to help her. He repeated that she was pretty cute. Leora understood that she was Dean's younger sister. Then Leora got angry and Dean told her that she was making a scary face. She said she didn't know if he would believe her, but there was a spirit beside your sister. She said a mark received from the influence of that spirit was floating above Dean's head. Dean said he could not see anything. Jin said generally it was only strong spirits, but to see a mark was weird. Dean was shaking and Jin wanted him not to look at him with a serious face. Jin said it looked like an artificial flower. Jin tried to uproot the flower from his head and he wobbled. Leora said it was a form of mental domination. Because the effect was suddenly cut off, he just lost consciousness. Leora asked Jin, aside from seeing it, if he could also touch it. He said he could do it when he put his mind to it. Usually he could only see Rish, his dog, so that it didn't affect his daily life. It seemed that the spirits who were called gods could be seen if they decided to show themselves. She said he was the first she had met aside from her father. Jin asked if her bloodline was able to see them. She said yes, but in the family it was only her father and her who could see them now, but they could not touch them. She told him to be cautious since that ability would be coveted. He said he would take care. Dean whined and Jin asked for the time being if they should have started with silencing that one. He thought if they left him there, then a bear might have eaten him, but then he wanted to leave him there as a joke. He thought he didn't say anything, so he didn't think Dean found out. Jin asked Leora, by calling Ash as she introduced herself like that, if she was okay with her ability to see being found out. She said she was saved by him and asked if Dean was his friend. He said no, and it was only the second time he had met him properly. She started to think aloud and said if they left him there, then a bear could eat him. Jin realized their train of thought was the same. She said that was an error in her judgment. She would just resign herself to this situation. Leora, by another name Ash, seemed like a person who would get the short end of the stick. As they were on that subject, Leora asked Jin if he could see the spirit that followed her. He tried to see it and a bird was continuously pecking her. He was shocked that she was being extremely pecked. Seeing the bird pecking his head like that, Jin wondered if it hurt him, to which he responded that there was an unbearable dull pain. Jin then noticed that there was a band of light around its neck that looked like a collar. He used appraisal, and apparently its name was Ru, and it was a captured spirit with the objective to make Aldehyde Ru Leora more manly. She explained that it was a spirit that his father attached to her when she was 7. He now understood why it was dull because it had been so long. He asked what it was for, and she responded that it was so she would become an outstanding successor. Jin was confused because she had a younger brother. She heard that it was because her father was drunk and woke up next to a woman, and then it was sent over to them after some time. Luckily, their country didn't differentiate between male or female successors as long as they were firstborn. However, their family had served in the military for generations. Her father attached a spirit to her, so when she trained, there wouldn't be any difference between genders. Although he was saying it in such a good light, Jin wondered if it wasn't strange to be more manly, but she didn't seem to understand what he meant. He said that it was better to release that spirit because it was desperately pecking him. She explained that it was originally meant to be released 2 years ago, but his father collapsed. She asked if he could release that spirit. Jin asked if they should try it when they get back to town. She accepted his suggestion and mentioned that she wanted to show her gratitude, whatever the outcome was. Jin knew she didn't have any money, so he asked about her lodging and she said that she was going to hunt bears. A while later, Dean woke up and started to apologize to his sister because he spoiled her too much. Ash responded that he was under the influence of an evil spirit and that was no different from being left astray. In the guild, she saw that only men had the mark. There was also a person with a single petal. Perhaps because he was with Emil the longest, he had more petals and was under a stronger influence. Jin seemed uncomfortable because a scene of men with flowers blooming on their heads was very disagreeable. Dean apologized to Jin too and continued that if people suddenly collapsed like he did, the guild would be in chaos. So he decided to discuss it with Kana, and then take Emil to the Bower of Spirits. Jin remembered that Ash was supposed to take him there when they met. Since he didn't know a lot about it, he decided to just keep mum. Listening to their conversation, it seemed that each city had its Bower of Spirits, though they differed in design. It was a place to approach spirits, but it was also where they could be cast out. Dean informed them that he needed to go back to town now to lay the groundwork. He told them to use a conveyor if they were going to hunt the bears. Jin didn't know about the conveyor, so Ash explained that it was a person who transports the game that an adventurer catches. He had already requested one for today, so he gave one to Jin. Dean then told him that the fact that they could see and touch, he would never snitch on them, so they didn't need to worry. As Jin knew, he knew that he could touch the mark of the spirit. After he left, Jin and Ash went back to back and sliced monsters together. She praised the way his moves were fast and efficient. Jin felt good hearing that, but he thought he should be saying that to her. Ash was serene and her clean and methodical use of the sword was powerful. He only mimicked that with martial arts and physical ability. There was a problem when they called people to carry the monsters. They couldn't carry all of them because the carriage was cracking. They had to carry the rest of the wolves themselves. They weren't able to hunt any bears, but Ash said that amount of wolves should be enough even though they had a lower price than the bears. She apologized for troubling him. Jin asked where she wanted to try it, and she said that she might lose consciousness longer than Dean, so she suggested the inn. Jin asked what would happen if she was unconscious for days and where her butler was. Ash explained that he went off on his own and they were supposed to rendezvous in Canaan, but she didn't know when he would arrive. Jin invited her to his house if it was alright with her, and she accepted it. When they arrived, he showed her the place she could sit. As she was looking around, she said that he had good taste, which made him glad that he repaired his rental house in Canaan. He then noticed that he smelled like the wild since he carried those wolves, so suggested a hot bath. He told her to wait there while he prepared the bath. A lot of bathhouses had steam baths. There were also places where they had bathtubs, but when he did the appraisal, he was apprehensive about the sanitary conditions, so they were out. He decided to use the washtub for laundry. After preparing everything, he told Ash that the toilet was behind the last door and he would be upstairs. He decided to use this time in transition to change his clothes and also prepare a guest bed on the second floor. He wanted a bathtub in this house too. After everyone cleaned up, Jin prepared some tea and snacks and asked if they should begin. She seemed ready, so he sat in front of her and poked the bird. It didn't seem to stop pecking on its own. He thought the solution could be removing that collar on its neck, but when he did that, Ash passed out and collapsed on him. Her chest was too flat for Jin, so he didn't feel the least bit excited. He put her to bed and started talking with the bird. He asked if it can't take revenge on this person for being constrained. He was actually glad it went easier than expected. He didn't know when she would wake up, so he decided to let her stay there in the meantime. In the meantime, he decided to furnish the third floor too, so it doesn't look out of place. The night came and he finished all his work, but Ash was still sleeping. He then started patting Reach and apologized for not taking care of him lately. It didn't look like Ash would wake up anytime soon. Suddenly, Mishto, Rudil, and Pal appeared in his house. He was happy to see them, but wondered why they were there. Rudil apologized for the suddenness and stated that they had a request to make of him. Pal continued and asked if he could give names to the spirits who fled here. Mishto said his sister was using a large amount of magic, but the way she used it was so reckless. She can't see spirits, so it might be unavoidable, but she had an obsessive yet fickle nature, and they were suspecting that she would do something rash within a year. A lot of the little spirits have been used up and disappeared. She heard that Namina had already warned her, but since that one tends to get carried away easily and could absorb power, it was ineffective. Namina was the ball of light that caused him to come to this world. So since it can absorb power, it wasn't proactively stopping her. Mishto said that if Namina regained power and his sister could see spirits, she was worried she would dominate every one of them thoroughly. They knew that he didn't want to involve himself in that situation, but the spirits were so noisy that Rudale couldn't stand it. The actions or directions of the hero shouldn't be limited too much, but if this situation continues, it would have an impact on many places. Jin couldn't understand it too well, but he wondered about the impact. Mishto explained that he should see the spirits here for himself. She told him to look outside the window. He took a deep breath and used his ability to see the spirits. There was so much that they were squeezing the window he was looking at. He couldn't believe he was living in the middle of all these. Mishta said that since his sister's dominance affected them even just by being near her, they came and gathered to where Jin had liberation. Jin asked what he should do, and Pal explained that it would be good to give them names as they wouldn't be subject to anyone else's domination, and could scatter freely. That all depended on whether the magic of liberation was stronger than the connection between the person and the spirit. If he created a bond beforehand, the spirits would probably choose him. He seemed pretty uneasy about naming this amount of spirits. Pal said that he could name them anything, and if they don't like it, he could just change it. In that case, any name without thought was alright. If the spirit liked another person, they could receive a new name at that time anyway. There seemed to be a contradiction somewhere, as Jin thought. For spirits, it would be the order of the person they liked, him, then his sister. Rudel told him that those spirits which he had given a name would lend him their power if they wanted, so he could just give them numerical names. When he accepted it, Misto suggested going outside because they made it so that Jin's house could not be entered without permission. She makes the spirits get in a line. He started naming them by their colors and naming them. 2 hours passed and he still hadn't done it yet, so he decided to take a break. He then remembered that he should check on Ash's condition. He used his transition ability to escape his house, but it didn't work because Mishto was there asking who was Ash. He showed her Ash and explained that he freed her from this spirit. He was keeping her safe because she collapsed. When he looked at Mishto, he saw her concerned face. She said that it was a maiden's crisis. When she said that, Jin wondered if Mishto clearly saw her as female. He told her that he didn't have any intention of laying his hands on her. She said that she didn't mean it like that and started doing something. After a few seconds, she said that it would be fine with that. She said that there was no need for her to go to the toilet until she woke up. He thanked her because he didn't think of that. She then asked what the bird's name was. He said that when he checked with appraisal, it said Rue. Seemed like its contract binding had been terminated so a new one could be made. She said that the bird wanted him to name it. The breast feathers were soft and fluffy, so he thought about naming it Fluffly, but he gave up on that idea immediately. He was looking at the bird to find something, then suggested the name Azu, and it looked like it liked that name. It was blue in Italian. He took it from Missouri, but if he liked it, then it was fine. He asked Azu if he would mind watching over Ash. Both of them were constrained under a contract, but they were together. Ash might feel sad if the little bird disappeared. Now that they handled that, it was time to go back and continue with the naming. When they went back, Kadal and Ish were there too. He continued naming them, and when they were all done, they told him that they would leave it to him if they increased again once or twice a month. Jin was relieved, but then a huge light appeared. Redial told him to wait and informed him that it was fine to open his eyes now. He added some darkness to weaken the light. Ish explained to him that it was the effect of them lending him their powers. Until recently, Jin remembered that just saying light was enough, and Mishto did say before that to use magic. He must imagine it. It was time for dinner, so he looked at his guest and asked if they would like to eat. They started telling him the things they eat, which sounded pretty unbalanced to him. He prepared a good dinner and they all started eating. He looked at everyone and couldn't believe how surreal this scene was, especially Ish, who was eating salt. It was just plain salt, so Jin had a hard time believing that he was okay. He wondered if the spirits could eat food. Mishto explained that human-like spirits could eat various things but could not taste them. Those that weren't humanoid varied depending on their attributes. The water of morning or evening dew, or the fire of a bonfire or a hearth, or even the scent of flowers. Reach came and Jin told him to wait while they were eating. Suddenly, Rudel asked what he was scheming. Jin was puzzled, so Mishto explained that they couldn't even get close to Reach before, but they did slightly distrust him. Jin was pretty surprised. Kadal explained that before Reach lost his powers, he was a powerful deity who shook the heavens and split the earth. He gratified his desires and scorned all counsel. All who stood in his way were bitten to death. Jin couldn't believe this cute little thing was an alpha dog. As they were confused, he explained that an alpha was the #1 leader, and dogs were supposed to follow the leader of the pack. If there is one who doesn't, they become stressed and ferocious. To put it in human logic, one needs to be a perfect leader, otherwise both parties will be unhappy. For example, one should not hug another above the shoulders, or humans should eat first. They must live by acting in accordance to human rules. But Reach was a spirit and a wolf. He said that wolves were the same and asked if spirits were different. Kadal said someone's appearance could reflect their personality, but that wasn't always the case. In his memories, Reach could speak and was highly intelligent. Jin couldn't say anything because intelligence and instinct were different, but for now, Reach was just a cute dog in his eyes. He said once he started speaking, he would think about it and thank them for their concern and the warning. After that, they all thanked him and left the spirits to him next time as well. Everyone except Rudel was gone. He took a look at Rish and called him a solitary wolf, and then left. Jin was confused once again, but if that was an act, that would be a surprise. He decided to take a bath and sleep. The next day, he came to the pottery town to order a bathtub and some tableware later. A man named Malcolm greeted him and stated that he looked like someone with an idea for new merchandise. Jin introduced himself and gave him an idea for a bathtub. Malcolm said he recently received an inquiry from a noble in the neighboring country about a bathtub, and this was a godsend. When they said they wanted a clawfoot bathtub, he just started making a prototype. Jin was sure that he was talking about his sister and her friends. Malcolm said that he had never made one of those before, but it should be worthwhile, so he wanted him to let him help develop it. Jin thought it should be fine since he would be making it. With separation, news of him shouldn't reach his sister, but he never thought he would get involved like that. When he went back to his house, Ash woke up and thanked him. Jin asked if she could move or hurt anywhere, and she responded that her back hurt a little bit. It was probably because she was sleeping the whole time. She was confused as to why it was evening and didn't realize how much time passed since she collapsed. Jin informed her that it was the third day and she apologized. Jin told her that he gave the bird another name while she was asleep. She asked what he named it and he told her. She smiled and said that it was a good name. If it accepted him, then that means the spirit liked him, so there was nothing to apologize for. The thing Jin was shocked about was that she had the most beautiful face and he almost couldn't recognize her. While they were talking about Azu, all he could think was that he looked like a beautiful girl, but rather a beautiful young man. Girls like Pinkhead wouldn't be able to leave her be. He warned her to not get tricked into someone's bed, but she responded that it would mean he tricked her because she was literally in the bed. He told her that he didn't trick her, so she should think of him as safe. Since her body was fasting, he decided to go make her some soup for now, and once she had eaten, she should rest some more. She asked if it was okay if she stayed there for the night, and he responded that he wasn't so heartless as to toss her out at night. He told her to hurry and get better so she could take back the rent money she was scammed out of. She also thought about paying rent to him for letting her stay there. The next day, they met with Note, and he seemed pretty happy that she was safe. While they were talking, Jin looked around and saw some spirits following them. but there didn't seem to be a man with an artificial flower on them. Dean came and told him that since he made him meet him when it was difficult, he wanted to treat him to a pint as an apology. He then met Note, and Note introduced himself as a butler until a few years ago, and now he was an adventurer. He said that he had a connection with Lord Ash as something of an uninvited attendant. Dean said that 2 or 3 people wouldn't make a difference. He said that his younger sister Amil went to the Bower of Spirits to have her spirit cast out. A lot of people in the guild collapsed, but now it was a bit more settled. It would be a sore spot for the guild, so he asked them not to spread it too much. Amil would start again from the bottom, and if she cannot fix her spoiled attitude, she cannot return to reception. A spirit's prank could happen to anyone, and if it wasn't intentional, one would be given a reprieve to start over. Even if it was only a prank on a spirit, there were instances when it could become a horrible tragedy. This time, it was only because Dean, who was a close relative, noticed and dealt with them. After that, it was handled leniently. Ash was warning him. If he says anything about them, it would jeopardize the magnanimous treatment and the understanding of the people around them. Ash looked like an airhead, but she was smart. They also asked Dean to handle the formalities when Ash's money was returned. Also, Dean said if he stayed with his sister, he would probably spoil her, so he was staying at a lodging house. It was a nice place, so he asked if they would want him to introduce them to the manager. Note said they had been looking into renting a house post-haste, but he asked if it was possible to request a 2-bedroom house for a short stay. While sipping his beer, Jean remembered that the legal drinking age was 15 years old, but there was still a guilty pleasure to that. Dean asked Jean if he would like to accompany a mid-level adventurer once. He wasn't strong enough to stand out, but he was someone who fulfilled requests for certain, and he could introduce himself. Jean accepted, and then they decided to meet up tomorrow at the same time. Dean added that both Jean and Ash were strange, so they better be careful not to fall for anything weird. Seeing Ash's reaction, Dean told her to unwrinkle that brow if he thought it was weird. Jean agreed about Ash's wrinkled brow, but he was still confused. Dean said they both had good looks and weird ones would surely approach them. In the next scene, Jean woke up and noticed that it was snowing outside. He prepared his breakfast and started eating in silence. He recalled the days when he was in the mountains in winter. When he finished his breakfast, he started to clean it up and prepare for Dean to introduce an adventurer to him. In Canham, Note and Ash were waiting for Jean. They wanted to ask about the potion fees from the other day. Jean said that he didn't give it to her, expecting compensation, but she was still insisting. He said that once she had found a place to live and her life was stable, he would come and ask for it. But even after she had found a house, he was sure she would have a lot to buy for it too. She understood him and apologized. Dean came with an adventurer named Letzi. Jean introduced himself and stated that he was looking forward to working with him. Letzi informed Jean that he wasn't great at speaking formally, so he wanted to speak normally. Jean was pretty surprised. Letzi suddenly started whispering to Dean. He told him that he couldn't stand that feminine look and asked him to do it, but Jean could hear them. Dean told him that he already screwed up once and that he can't do that again. Letzi was also wondering why both of them were good looking. It was the god's fault, but he couldn't say anything. Jean called Letzi and he said, "Let's go with an attitude." Jean asked if he had a complex about good-looking guys, but Dean had no idea. With that, Jean's first request to have an adventurer accompany him finally happens. In the forest, Letzi explained that he hunts rabbits at this time of year since their fur and meat are in season. Large bears, when sold to the rich, sell for a lot, but small bears, on the other hand, don't. He would rather hunt rabbits since they were easier than the small bears, which needed a great deal of effort to catch. He usually looks at the bulletin board to check the price of the meat. If it was too cheap, he would just sell the fur and go home. Horned monsters were hard to sell because their meat was tough, but their fur was quite strong on its own, so the fur sold pretty well. But lately, the rewards for hunting bears have declined. Jean figured that this was probably Ash and his fault. Letzi showed him the grass and explained that he could figure out which direction his prey had gone by looking at how the grass was disturbed and split. If he looked closely and observed, he could find the traces of animals. Jean was impressed by how professional he was. Letzi continued to explain that most rabbits' hide lines move in unison, while their forelimbs move independently. Their hind limbs were also significantly larger than their forelimbs. He asked about the paw prints, and Letzi explained that those normally belong to a fox. They always walk in straight lines, leaving paw prints like those. With these kinds of paw prints, it was hard to tell whether it was a monster or not. Those belonged to horned rabbits. Jean asked how he knew that, and he said that there were some claw marks in the snow. It seemed to be chasing its prey, so it was likely a monster. Jean thought he could just use search and leave the rest to his sword. He wondered if he did many things in front of Dean. Letzi said if it was a regular rabbit or fox, he could hunt them with a short bow, but that was not possible with monsters. When one rabbit appeared, Letzi caught it easily, and told Jean that it was easier if it was a monster since it would come charging at him. He was once again amazed by Letzi. Letzi decided to show him how to hunt a fox next, and they continued their day with this. When they got back to the guild, The woman in there thanked Letzi for nicely skinning the rabbit furs. Jin noticed that Letza was a talkative person. They started drinking to recharge their energy, and Jin thanked Letza for what he taught him that day. Letza said that he was a weird guy and asked if it was okay to learn his method of hunting instead of Dean's, but then responded to his own question by saying that with his thin arm, his method would be better for him. Dean was buying his drinks today, so he told him to drink more. At night, when he went home, Jin was still thinking about his thin arm. Starting today, he decided to eat protein and train his muscles. The next day, he went to check if his bathtub was completed. The shop owner was glad that he was there. He showed him what he made, and Jin loved how it came out. He thanked him, and the man asked how he was going to carry it. He hadn't thought about that until now. He wanted to take it home using storage, but he can't use it in public. He asked if he wanted to rent a carriage for now, but he said that he already had something prepared. The owner told him to wait while he wrapped the bathtub. He and one of his workers helped Jin to carry it to somewhere that was not public, and when they left, he used his storage power. It was difficult to use storage for big objects. Jin then went home and started building a place to put the bathtub. After a while, he was done with the bathtub and he seemed pretty satisfied with the result. Ash came and apologized for bothering him and explained that she was here for a gift since she was moving in. Jin was happy that she found a house and asked where she was going to live. Ash pointed at the building that was right in front of his house. Jin said it was a good neighborhood, so it was nice to have her here. Ash apologized suddenly, and when he asked the reason, she said that Note found the house, but she didn't remember telling him where he lived, yet he found one next to his. Jin thought it was just a coincidence, but she said that it was most likely her fault. When she was talking to him at that time, she was happy. John was confused because her face didn't show that she was happy. Jin decided to invite her in the meantime because it was cold outside. They went inside and he offered some tea. She gave him his gift and it was a delicious-looking tart. When Jin tasted it, he stated that it was the best one he had in this city. She said Note recommended it. Note was a very competent butler. She then noticed that he was making something, so she asked if he had done something, and he responded that it was a bath. She was confused, so he decided to just show it to her. Ash was shocked to see the bathtub. Jin explained that you could fill it with hot water and take a bath in it. She had never seen something this lovely before. Jin said that the walls weren't dry yet, so once they were dry, she could try it out. She then asked if it was okay if she called Note. Jin was okay with that, so she did, and Note came. He seemed surprised to see the bath. When she said Jin told her she could try it when it was ready, his face didn't seem too pleasant with that. He totally forgot she was a woman and a young lady. He asked if that was a problem, and Note responded that as a servant, he should refrain her from doing so, but he was also curious. Ash told Note to go to the kitchen, and when they went, Note said there wasn't any smell, which was strange to them. Jin now understood why they were acting like that. Note said that the toilet was walled off, so the smell from the sewage didn't leak. He asked which workshop he asked for this, and Jin said it was him. As Note seemed puzzled, Ash explained that Jin was the one who made that. Note was shocked, but then asked if he had thought about publishing or registering this invention at the guild. When Jin said he didn't, he told him to register it quickly, and later money came in like crazy. In the next scene, Jin is freezing outside. He came to the lake to make some bedding for Ash and Note, but he needed to make a downcoat for himself as well. He wanted to go home as soon as possible, so he started right away. He made sure not to make any noise so they wouldn't run away. He caught one and then reeled it with the rope. He also realized that the birds were drawn to the smell of blood. He used his transfer ability to go back. He decided to warm up a bit and then head out again because he still needed to hunt more. He then knocked on Ash's door, and Note greeted him. Jin asked how the movie was coming along, and Ash responded that it was going well. He happened to be around to help guide workers like a foreman sorts. A lot of craftsmen ended up dropping by and it was getting quite crowded. He gave them the bedding he made as a housewarming gift and informed them that it was made from horned goose feathers. Note and Ash were quite shocked because it was quite a luxury product. Ash thought they were too difficult to hunt. Note added that this was a bit much for a housewarming gift. Jin said the only cost to him was the arrows and rope. He didn't realize it was such a big deal. He then asked them to join him for dinner. Note told Ash to enjoy himself, but Jin informed him that he was also invited too. Note was surprised because for him, he was just a mere butler and he couldn't sit at the same table as his master. Ash didn't care about that at all and he had been invited too, so she asked if it was okay if he joined them too, and Jin confirmed him. Jin prepared a good dinner and also made his version of the tart he had made before. He also said that this roast was made with the meat from those horned goose. They prayed and then started to eat. When Ash tasted the food, she was amazed by how delicious it was. Note also stated that the turnip soup was exquisite as well. Jin noticed that Ash looked a bit scary when eating, so he tried to assume that she was happy. He started to understand what her facial expressions meant. He said that she looked happy, and she confirmed with him. She said that delicious food puts her in a good mood. Jin was about to serve them the tart he made, but then a spirit came and destroyed the tart. They were all shocked and confused. Those two spirits were the ones he had named, who he had tasked to keep other spirits away. He didn't know where that black spirit came from, though. Ash didn't look like she knew anything about that, so he decided to not reveal his ability to see the spirits to the butler. He had to fake something to explain them. He said that it could be because of the temperature shock or something like that, and then said that he would go get some hand towels and another tart. In the kitchen, he tried to decide on what to do with the spirits. He thought they could be confined by glass or other certain materials. He put one of them in a pickle, and he was glad he brought some bran to the Canum house. He was sure this enamel-glazed container would do. He thanked Rose and Khan for their great job and promised to make it up to them later. Note came to the kitchen and explained that the spirit was his familiarity and apologized for ruining his tart. Jin was relieved. Note said its name was Quinn. It was a spirit of snowy nights, and it usually stays a bit further away so no one notices it. Jin asked if Ash knew about it, but apparently she didn't. Note said that his family, the Pardils, were a branch family to the Alderhides. A branch family was not allowed to surpass the main line. Ash thinks Note could only see spirits. His gray hair and amber eyes were quite similar to Ash's, as Jin thought. He asked if she didn't know he could interact with spirits. They had already been disowned by their families, so he wondered why they weren't just free. Jean told him that the next time he brought a spirit, it would come in through the front door. After settling that, Jean went back to prepare another tart. In the next scene, he was visiting a very lively port town. While the seafood was drawn, this country neighbors the one his sister and her friends sent to. So in a way, this was an information-gathering trip. Mishto and the rest were talking about how they were doing whatever they wanted with magic. Spirits who had their energy drained by humans could possess animals as a means of self-preservation. They say monsters were formed from spirits holding grudges. That's why he was there, to see if there had been any change in the environment. He wondered if there had been any news of a hero going wild with magic, but he also wondered how he could find out. He started listening to a customer and a shop owner talking. The customer asked if those Schlimmtus guys were still raiding their fisheries, and the owner confirmed him. He said that some of his boys came home injured as well. They mentioned something about a hero or a saint, but even so, it wasn't like they were benefiting from their existence, and they were just causing trouble for them. While he was listening, a hand reached for Jean's jacket, but he already knew that was coming, so he grabbed the man's hand and his money dropped out of his hand. The man escaped right away after losing the money he just stole, and Jean didn't care about him. He thought about how his sister hadn't changed at all. He decided to get some food and go home. He made fresh oysters, and with appraisal, he could eat without worrying about getting sick. While he was thinking about marinating the leftovers in oil, Rish came. He asked if he wanted to play, but the fish smell from his hands didn't appeal to Rish. The sky was getting dark, so he tried to make it lighter, but he couldn't control his magic, so he was almost burning his eyes. He decided to do some training tomorrow before heading to the guild. The next day, he went to the demon forest area and started his training. He made a fireball to kill a horned rabbit and realized that he was more powerful than he thought he was, which meant that he needed to be able to control this properly. He used various powers such as wind slash and water bullets to kill the rabbits and felt he had improved a lot, but he realized that he had overdone it with hunting. He could probably keep them all in storage. When he entered the guild to check the quest board and see what was in demand, he saw Dean arguing with someone. He wondered what was about and started listening to them. Someone was telling Dean that he didn't see any three-horned monsters at all, and the demon forest was completely deserted of them. Dean said that they only send a survey team once every 2 years, and he didn't care if he didn't find any horned monsters. It wasn't a request, and they were not going to take that risk. Chris, the man arguing with him, threw his fist to the table and told him that 3 horned monsters were formidable beasts and were an indicator of the presence of black-tainted monsters, and if they were too late to see what was going on, they would get much too strong. Jean wondered who he was and tried to remember if the name Chris sounded familiar. Ash came back, and apparently, this Chris guy knew her. He said that he would understand the severity of the situation, but Ash responded that it was up to the guild, not her. Jean then figured that this man could be the other adventurer who would like to help the nobles that Dean didn't want to deal with when he first came to the guild. He sounded like a hassle. Chris saw Jean and asked who he was and called him Evening Twilight. Jean didn't seem to like that expression, but Ash agreed that he was a bit like the knight. Chris introduced himself as the 3-starred silver rank. As they shook hands, Chris asked Jean if he would accompany him on the search for 3-horned monsters. Jean obviously didn't expect himself to get caught up in something weird. Dean interrupted Chris and reminded him that he was the one who wasn't able to find any 3-horned monsters. He was having a hard time holding back his laugh. Chris responded that it was true he didn't see any, but he couldn't stop thinking about this disturbance in the demon forest, so he would stake it all on this intuition of his. Dean asked if he had a hunch, and he responded that it was intuition. He told him to spit it out and asked why he was rushing. He said that they could do it in the spring too. Jean was confused as to why Dean was suddenly so open to the idea. Note approached Jin and informed him that Chris was being possessed by a spirit. There was a possibility that it was an oracle-type spirit and the people around them could not see it, so it was being put down as a feeling of intuition. Jin now figured out everything. People who could actually see spirits were few and far between, so if it seemed like you were the recipient of a spirit's favor, it was taken quite seriously. Sometimes the effect might be more subtle, like being immune to sunburn or perhaps being blessed with greater physical ability. It seemed this blonde Chris could intuit a bit about the future. Contrary to the whole investigation angle, this was just a hunt for three-horned monsters, so Chris would need a silver rank or two, and Dean would end up being called in. Chris knew that Dean owed the guild for the whole business with his sister, so turning down a request from the guild would be bad for him. Dean asked if he was looking to recruit people with experience hunting twin-horned monsters, and he responded that they would only be subjugating a single monster, and they wouldn't be staying in the forest for too long. Considering their town and the neighboring cities, he would like to get gold ranks in this if possible. The atmosphere in the forest was simply not normal. Ash told him to get to the point already. Dean turned to Jin and wanted him to join them for this forest expedition, even though he knew he already owed him one. But Jin refused without thinking. Dean offered him to be a baggage handler and he could just run away if things get dicey. He said that he would like to see what was happening inside the forest, and he didn't intend to force him to do anything. Jin was a little curious, so he accepted his request. Dean was going to ask Ash to join them too because it would be good to have people they knew tag along. If that was the case, Note would join as well and he wouldn't say anything about this. Before he left, Dean said he would like to get out there sooner rather than later, but venturing into the forest through thick snow was not very efficient, so they would wait until spring, and he would send a request via the guild. Jin didn't get too much information from the port city. If his sister was using overwhelming amounts of magic, that could be the reason behind the disturbance in the forest. Both he and his sister had been in this world for a few months now, and he didn't know if he would laugh or cry if his sister's action had affected the environment all the way out to the demon forest. Jin had always hated having to clean up her mess. Tomorrow he decided to go a bit deeper into the demon forest. Tomorrow came and he started looking around at how those spirits were holding up. He used his vision to see them, and they were all there. For the most part, they were the kind of spirits that gathered around his house. There were a few black ones and also a few that looked kind of beaten up. Some of them were getting smaller or even disappearing. He saw a black spirit eating the other one. Apparently it was trying to make up for what it had lost from other spirits, but it didn't change the fact that it was something unpleasant to watch. Healing didn't work on spirits as they were empowered by their contracts like Rish and the others, so he would have to name them like that other time. He started naming them until he got exhausted. Spirits weren't rushing to him like they did before. So, naming those spirits who don't want to be controlled takes a lot out of him. It was tiring chasing them around, so he decided to continue this tomorrow. He went to Denoso's place and asked if he was available. He was sitting with his 3 kids and they all seemed happy to see him. Denoso hugged Jin while expressing that he was glad he could make it. He said that he had bought some souvenirs, wine and whatnot, and cake too. The kids were so happy with what he brought and they all hugged him. He realized that this family really liked hugging. Denoso apologized for having him do this, and Shiva, his wife, thanked him and wanted to enjoy the cake all together. The Denoso family were farmers and they had become friends while they taught him about cheesemaking. While Denoso was crying about the wine, Jin asked what they were doing. He responded that they were peeling beans because it gets cold in the winter, so they do things by the fire. And they fix farm equipment like that too. He decided to lend a hand too and he thanked him. When Shiva cut the cake, she served everyone, and they all seemed to enjoy the cake. Denoso's daughter liked him so much that she said that she was going to become Jin's wife one day. While Denoso was saying that he would never allow this, Shiva liked that idea. Jin stopped their argument by saying that he wasn't looking to get married yet, but then Denoso got offended and asked if there was something wrong with his daughter. The other kids also wanted to marry into Jin's family and hugged him while he was trying to figure out what was with their grip on him. Seeing them being in love with Jin, Denoso wanted to marry him too. While everyone was laughing at how silly the situation was, Jin realized that his family was nowhere near as nice as this family. And the time passed like that. Spring arrived in no time at all, and it was time to leave for the expedition. Chris greeted Evening Twilight, Jin and Moonlight, which was Ash, when they arrived. Letza was also there and he heard that Jin had gotten involved with Chris, so he told him that they would take care of the fighting, but he needed to watch out for himself too. He was also a bit concerned about his lack of experience. But when Dean mentioned that he hunts bears, he was shocked because he thought Ash was the one who kept hunting bears. Ash explained that this all started with Jin. That reminded Jin that he hadn't sold anything at the guild recently. Dean said the guild wouldn't let him accompany them if they didn't have some idea of his ability. Chris started laughing and said that his hunch about him was correct. Jin couldn't help but stare at Chris's spirits because she was happily stroking his cleft chin. Kana came and told everyone that they were looking forward to working with them. She thanked Jin for cooperating with them even though they had greatly inconvenienced him in the past. She also wanted him to let her examine his bag's dimensions. She gave him a Godspeed potion on behalf of the guild, and with that, they were ready to go. While walking, Dean asked what was so special about his bag. Ash also wondered about the thing wrapped up at the top. Jin explained that he made it himself out of leather and the top roll was futon bedding. Ash thought it would be a hassle if monsters were to attack, and it was also heavy, and it would be hard to throw it down before a fight. Jin responded that it was easily detachable, and he had made it so it could be fastened with those belts and clips. Chris concluded that his own bags would be more likely to hinder them. He looked so serious, but Jin couldn't see him like that because the spirit was enraptured by stroking his chin. They continued throughout the forest and cut down monsters. After a while, Dean suggested taking a break for lunch. Thanks to the good weather, they were making quite good progress. Jin took out kitchen utensils and ingredients like dried chicken, onions, and mushrooms. He seasoned them with salt and pepper, and it was done. He also prepared lots of sandwiches. Dean's mouth was watering while looking at the food he brought. Jin said he could have some because he wouldn't be able to eat it all anyway. But he didn't expect everyone to dig in. They all seemed to like the sandwiches. Dean preferred the harder loaves, but this meat was delicious. Letza asked what was coating the meat, and he responded that they were breadcrumbs. He explained that the meat was dipped in flour and eggs, then coated in breadcrumbs and fried. Note took some notes from him to use later. Ash asked the other meat, and Jin explained that that was also fired in oil. It was seasoned with salt and pepper, garlic, ginger, fish sauce, and brandy. After they were all full, they continued their way. Jin noticed that his shoes were getting dirty, so he wondered if it was because of the way he walked because Note's shoes were pristine. He decided to copy his gait. Chris informed everyone that from this point on there would be wolves as well. They were not as strong as bears, but they hunted in packs. When it gets down to it, he tells Ash and Jin to not wait for them and to take the initiative when appropriate. Even though he was annoying, Chris was attentive and looked out for his party members so Jin could stand him. They had a pack approaching them, and Jin noticed that they were ganging up on him. He concluded that they knew he was the weakest member here. When the wolves started coming at him one by one, he sliced them very easily, leaving everyone in shock. Chris thought he was showing gaps in his defense to lure in enemies because he was just that strong, but he was just not used to being on guard. Dean said he didn't look like a fighter, but he was more than meets the eye. It made Letza inadequate that he and Ash were meant to be new adventurers. Note told Ash that the other monsters would be attracted by the smell of blood, so they should take those horns quickly and move on. After getting the horns, they continued to arrive at their campsite. When they arrived at their campsite, Jin prepared an adequate tent for the team. Dean was confused because even though he said he didn't like camping, he was a bit too good at it. Chris examined the tent and called him a genius at using waterproof sheets to make a wall and a roof. Jin said that he might not like camping, but he didn't say he was not good at it. After all, he lived by himself on that island for almost 2 months. Ash noticed that he used some moss as a cushion and she decided to go find more of them. Chris and Note joined her because it would be nice if there was enough for all of them to camp with. Jin couldn't believe they were going to strip the mountain of moss. That would be frowned upon back in Japan. Dean informed Jin that they were going to go catch some fish for dinner. In that case, Jin decided to make some soup for all of them, which sounded great as it would be pretty cold at night. Tonight's meal would be tomato soup with shredded meat, chickpeas, and lots of vegetables. He prepared the soup and then got the dough ready. While he was kneading the dough, Dean was confused and thought he was doing some kind of ceremony. Jin got the dough ready and decided to let it rise for a bit so he could make breakfast with that too. When the menu was ready, Chris asked what that one circle food was. Jin explained that it was pizza made with cheese, bacon, and some asparagus that he found in the area. That was his first time hearing about a dish called pizza. Dean thought it was the ritual-like thing he was doing earlier, but he didn't understand what he meant. When he tasted it, he really liked it. Note said it would be delicious with other ingredients too, and Jin responded that tomato sauce would be good too. Note seemed confused, so he wondered if this world had ever seen a tomato yet. He put dried tomatoes in the soup, but they didn't say anything. Chris said he would make a fine wife, and he seemed genuinely upset about that. Dean wondered what Jin's preferred type was, and he remembered that it wasn't his sister, which he wondered if it was because she was too flat for him. Ash seemed upset that Dean had a pretty big chest. That was not something a woman should aspire towards, but he didn't say that out loud. To stop the misunderstanding, he stated that he was still adjusting to dealing with people, so he wasn't sure what his type was. He had only been around people that he didn't trust. He had people confess to him a few times before. Letza asked if they said they were just joking afterward, and Chris seemed upset imagining him like that. Dean claimed that they might be embarrassed after confessing to him and ended up saying something like that. Jin said the first time he was 6, the second he was 10, and the third time he was 14, and all of them were different people. Dean asked if he was sure he wasn't cursed because 3 times seemed a lot. Letza responded that not all women were like that. He knew that, and he knew he had been in a bit of a unique scenario, so he was trying to work on it. His sister was the root cause of all this. The first time was a friend of his sister and was clearly put up to it by his sister, and all the other times were also by people who were somehow associated with his sister. He thought she looked at him like he was her property and that she enjoyed teasing him. It was a real pain in the ass, so after the second time, he just went along with the act from then on. While Chris was telling Jin to cheer up, it seemed like Ash was the one who should cheer up a little. At night, Jin was watching the stars while drinking his tea. Even though it was spring, it was still quite cold at night. Azu came to his shoulder and then he heard Ash informing him that she would take over the night watch. When Jin offered them some snacks, she thanked him for everything. She said that even that coat was light and comfortable. He responded that he made it for himself as a hobby, and besides, she had already repaid him for the potion. He was confused by her gloomy face and thought she might not like the biscuits he gave her. Suddenly, she told him that he was a nice guy, and she was sure he would be happy. He was confused, but he still thanked her. She continued to say that she was sure those confessions were just a set of pranks that happened to coincide. Jin knew what she was talking about and wondered if she was just trying to make him feel better. He responded that he had met some good people, so he was working on his distrust of people. She said that she was glad to have been part of the process. After confirming her, he informed her that he would let her take care of the rest. While going to his bed, he thought about her. Ash was a bit of a straight shooter, but it was still embarrassing to hear someone compliment you to your face. She was almost the opposite of his sister. She was quite open and honest. While smiling, he decided to get some rest and be ready for tomorrow. In the next scene, Jin prepared another feast for the team, and Letza realized that they were eating better out in the field than they did in the city. It had been a few days since they left, and they had been hunting, scavenging, and slowly making their way deeper in. They still haven't encountered any twin or three-horned monsters. When Ash mentioned that Red Inn would be nice here, Note agreed with her. Jin got confused and wondered if they were talking about red wine. Chris was surprised that he could cook bread in a pot. He had made a black mountain goat liver pate to go with the bread. The liver paste was made with salted water instead of milk to remove some of the gamey smell. It should be high in iron as well as vitamins, which were harder to come by with a more protein-heavy diet out in the field. He was probably the only one who cared about keeping to a healthy diet here. Chris wondered if they were going to sleep by the river tonight, and he responded that they weren't going to sleep there. He just made a steam bath. He explained that while they were out hunting for food, he used some flexible branches to make that, and it was a dome with some sheets over top. He used rocks for a bonfire inside, and when you pour water over those hot stones, you sweat out in this sauna and then jump into the river. Chris was amazed by how unrivaled he was when it came to traveling in comfort. That was indeed a subtle compliment to him. He told him to feel free to use it. When he got outside the tent, the rest of the group seemed curious too. He asked if they would like to use it as well, and they all were willing. They ended up all using the steam bath, and it was quite late now. The sheets needed to be dried, so he would have to sleep without cover tonight. After he hung the sheets, he noticed that there were quite a lot of spirits out, and they seemed to like gathering under the moon. He had asked one of his spirits to help them keep them away from him. He had been noticing more and more black spirits. He would love to name them and take care of the issue, but it would be a problem if anyone saw him. The next day, they continued their way to the forest, and Dean mentioned how great he was feeling after last night's steam bath. Chris agreed and added that they were making better ground than before. Suddenly, the Dean noticed something and told everyone to stop. There was a three-horned lizard in front of them. Forget seeing a twin-horned monster, they were going straight to the three-horned ones now. Those three-horned lizards were quite tenacious. To take one down, they either must go for the spine or the heart. Even so, they should probably stay put until Dean gives them the word. Most of its skin was tougher than a bone. Their best chance at taking it down was aiming for the spine through its throat. Dean told Chris that they would be splitting up. When one of them was on its right and the other was on its left, Dean attacked it and told Chris to attack. Chris successfully defeated the wizard by stabbing its throat just like Dean said. Ash and Note were pretty impressed by their work. Letza was still shaken up even though it went fine. That was only possible in a two-man team. It was hard to learn something from that. Letza said that regardless, three-horned lizards this deep in the forest confirmed that they had definitive proof. They had only been here for a week, and monsters in this area usually don't have horns or have a single horn at most. They had done their job here, and they were quite close to the next campsite. They would head there, then turn around and head back to town. Chris asked Jin if he could help him dismantle that. Letza also noticed that Jin was good at dismantling. He had been practicing his hunting skills. He was still bothered by the black spirits. There were more and more of them, and this area was smaller than the training grounds in the woods, but there were even more spirits present here. He wondered if horned monsters were being possessed by large black spirits. There were a lot of questions to which there was no answer. Jin asked Letza if he had lard left because he was dying to fry some up. Letza had plenty of them, so he said that he would go try and find some wild asparagus while everyone was out hunting. Letza told him to not go too far away from him because if the monsters were hungry, they were quite unpredictable. Jin thanked me for the heads up and continued his way. He saw the last few mushrooms from the winter months. There was a garlic mustard plant as well, so he thought about making pasta tomorrow. He decided to use search to make that easier for him. He used that while dismantling the lizard, but he was going to use it again now just in case. He saw a fox with 2 horns. It was not discouraged by the fire and making a beeline straight for them. He decided to let Letza know about that and went back. Letza said that he had covered it in cedar leaves to mask the smell. He gave Jin to mask his smell too, and once he got this on, they would hide downwind. Jin noticed that the fox was coming at them faster than he expected. He told Letza that it wasn't as tough as a lizard, so he should be able to take it down. Letza was shocked, but it was too late now. He was right in front of the fox and it was going to be one-on-one against this monster. That is the end of the recap for now. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.